Morning, folks. This is Greg Shields Outdoors. This is episode 4 of my How to Survive the Blue Side of Prison, surviving in a prison as an officer. Today I'm going to talk about the fights that happen daily. The fights in prisons are a daily occurrence at a federal prison and the state prison, and you respond to them in different ways. At the federal prison, you wear a body alarm, and it stays on your belt, and if there's a fight or something, you press the body alarm and the system alerts everybody in the prison where the fight is. And you don't go in there and try to break it up or get involved in it until help gets there, because it could be a setup, it could be all kind of things. And the best way to survive a fight in a correctional setting as an officer is for you not to be the one fighting. That's the main thing. You don't be the one in the fight. You stay away from altercations involving physical violence with the prisoners at all times, because you're going to get hurt. They're going to gang up on you, and you can't win. Plus, it's against the rules in every single correctional setting I've ever been in. But at the state system, if a fight breaks out, you call a 1010 on the radio. 1010 is the 10 code for a fight, and you say what building. Say you're in B building, you say 1010 B building, and the staff that's available will respond. I have broken up fights by myself when I felt like I could do it, but that came after years and years of experience and never early in my career. So you wait till help gets there, and if there's a weapon involved, you just don't get involved at all until people outfitted with protection get there. I mean, I hate it for them, but if an inmate gets cut or killed in an altercation or a fight, I guess that's just part of prison. But we're not going to sacrifice our life to break up a fight between two people with weapons when we don't have one. So that's out at all times, so forget about that. And one of the worst places that a fight can break out is the chow hall. If a fight breaks out in the chow hall, you might have, at the state level, you might have 10 or 12 officers running the meal for 1,500 inmates. That's the way it was at my prison. Well, at any given time, there's 250 inmates in the chow hall. And if a fight breaks out in there, it can escalate. You got to get in there and break it up. But it takes every single officer you have to do that. And if you don't get in there quick enough, it can escalate, because it'll turn into a racial deal, and then everybody's brawling. And you can actually lose the institution that way. But so it's a dicey situation, but you become so numb to it because it happens on a daily basis that it's just part of the job. That's just one of the things that happens in there every single day. And if an officer presence will stop a lot of the fights. So I found out that in the buildings, especially when I was a sergeant, I would have fights that would break out in certain buildings all the time when a certain officer or a group of officers was running that building. And those were the officers that were either scared to be in there, or they didn't make rounds. They sat in the control room. They didn't make rounds throughout the dorm or the cells. And once that happens and the inmates are freewheeling, basically what I call it, when there's no officer presence, that all the officers are ganged up in the control room, you will have twice as many problems as you're going to have in a building where the officers stay on the floor. I stayed on the floor because it makes your shift go faster. You sitting there in the control room and your shift just drags and drags. I stayed active, and I stayed dealing with the inmates, and I had very few problems. I'd have a fight occasionally, but a fight in a prison is always going to start with an argument first, almost all the time. So when you see an argument going down, get up in there and get them separated. Send one out to the yard. Take one outside to talk to you. Just anything to let it de-escalate before it gets out of hand. Strong arm robberies are another fight mechanism that breaks out in the prison system. And here's how that happens. At the state system, you have the store, the inmate store, or canteen, they call it in the federal prison. Well, inmates have money on the books. They put their store sheet in, and the store people fill the order. And on certain days, like on Monday, dorms A and B go to the store to get their store goods that they've bought with money that they've had sent in. Well, if you don't have officers on the sidewalk, and the inmate goes and gets his store goods, and he's a weaker inmate, or he's one that's been pegged as it won't stand up for himself, he's never getting back to that cell with those store goods. They're going to be taken 100% of the time. You got to be able, you got to stand up, and if you got to brawl, you have to brawl. But they're trying to get back to their dorm, and they're you know, not a big inmate or one that has shown that he's got the backbone, and there's a lot of them like that. And 3 or 4 inmates will gang him up on the sidewalk, and they won't jump on him. They'll just get around him and take his store goods. And his alternative is to bust one of them in the mouth. I mean, that's what you got to do. So what I would do is, I would try to put enough officers on the sidewalks, even if I had to pull some from the buildings while we ran store call. Store call wouldn't be but 2 hours. So, you know, pull an officer from each building and let him be on the sidewalks. That way, when you see an inmate, and we could recognize the weaker inmates just like the thugs could. I mean, it's just the way it is. You could recognize them. They look scared. They be smaller people. And so what you do is, when they get their store goods, just be walking the sidewalk that they're on. It gives them a chance to get back to their building with their store goods, and it just solves a lot of problems. I'll tell you one funny story. In one of my dorms, this was, I was a corporal at this time, and I had an inmate that used to help me. He was an inside orderly. He was in there for multiple murders. Small fella. His name was Sammy. I'm not going to say his last name because he's still in there, and people can look him up, and I'm not going to put his name out there, but his name was Sammy. And I used to go to his dorm when it come time to go to the warehouse to get supplies or whatever for cleaning, and he would leave his locker wide open. This is back when they could smoke in the state prison, so there'll be tobacco stacked that high in his cell. And he'd leave his cell, his locker door wide open. And I said, Sammy, you need to lock your box before we go. And he'd say, Officer Shields, nobody's gonna touch my box. He said, if they touch my box, the day I find out who did it, they die that night, period. And that was absolute truth. He meant that. They knew he meant that. And we would go back, watch out, buddy. We would go back to after being gone an hour picking up supplies, and nobody would have touched his stuff, not a single soul. And I bet he was 5'5", but he was a killer. And if you touched his store items that he bought and paid for with what little money he had there, he was serving a life sentence. He wasn't never getting out. You're a dead man, because when you laid down that night, he's cutting your throat or he's bashing your brains in. So it wasn't worth a pack of bugler to get killed over. So that's what people left that alone. And dealing with the murderers and the lifers in there, they were a different breed. That they had come to grips with the fact that they're never getting out, and it was easy to deal with them, and they were in very few fights. The lifers they kept to themselves. People knew who they were, and the bottom line is, I guess you don't want to. Why would you want to get in a fight with a guy that's killed 5 people? I mean, you basically are in deep trouble. So anyway, watch out, baby. So that's one of the things that Sammy used to do. And I'll tell you one story about a lifer named Jerry. And I'm not going to say his name either because he's still in there, but he didn't want to pay child support to his ex-wife. So what did he do? He hired a hitman to kill his wife. And so he went out to set up his alibi. He went out, just gallivanting around town where he'd be seen. And he was going to go back home after it was done. He knew when the killer was going to go there. And this is what he told me to my face. He said, Officer Shields, when I got home, he said there was so much blood and brains everywhere from him beating her to death that he said he threw up in the house before he called the police. But anyway, it eventually got back to him that he hired him, and now he's doing life without the possibility of parole. But I mean, that's what kind of people you're dealing with. So before you sail off into a fight with these inmates, you better have backup in there, because you're going up against psychopaths that they don't give a damn. You just got to understand that. But you also have to do your job. And that's about all I got to say about the fights. And I've been gone now for about 10 days off of my channel because we had a bad hurricane come through South Georgia, and it tore us up. And we still don't have internet and stuff here, so I'll have to download this later. But It's been pretty rough, but I'll get back on it. My next episode will be episode 5 of the Blue Side of Prison. I'm going to talk about transfers, when you're actually taking 50 to 75 inmates, which many of them will be murderers and rapists and killers, when you have to get them on a bus and take them out of that prison. And there's just 2 of you on the bus. I did that for several years, and I'm going to explain how that works. But anyway, y'all have a great day. I appreciate you tuning in. Please like and subscribe, and God bless you. Take it easy.